This week, we're joined with one of my dear friends, longtime friends, Reggie. Fred is an executive coach here in Lafayette, Louisiana, but he works throughout the country. He's a great speaker, and now he has written a book. So he's now an executive coach, a speaker, and an author. The book is called Tell Me. I want to ask you to listen to this episode. It's very, very important. From talking to total strangers and making sure that they are seen and they feel important, to talking with your leadership in a company and throughout a company, as well as family relationships. 2 simple words, tell me, can change your life forever. And I know this episode will. Welcome to Lead, Grow, Live, where our goal is to help you lead your people, grow your company, and live your life.
When I was 13 years old, we went to Guadalajara, Mexico for Christmas. We had relatives there, and my dad wanted to go visit them. My mother did not like to fly. So we were driving. As it turned out, one of our family doctors in Crowley, he had been the island doctor on Cozumel for about 2 or 3 years. So he knew Mexican culture. He knew the language. Well, he gets invited to join us on the trip. Okay, so the four of us are going down to, he's a young doctor, going down to Mexico together. Well, in Guadalajara, they have a lot of silver in that region. Okay, there's a district that you can go to, and they have these shops, kiosk after kiosk after kiosk, selling silver, sterling silver, cufflinks and knickknacks, belt buckles, all of that stuff. So the 3 of us, my dad, Dr. Falk, and myself, are going from kiosk to window shopping. And look, the shops aren't as wide as this, okay? My dad sees a pair of cufflinks, and he says, I want to go check these out. So I go in with him. Dr. Bill stays out, looking in the window. We go in, this guy waits on us. Obviously, he's an American because he's not a Mexican. I remember I said, "Oh, you're an American." And he says, "Don't say that around here." He says, Mexicans think they're Americans too because it's North America. So he said in a joking way, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from New Jersey." "Oh, really?" "Yeah," he says, "I come down here during the season." He says, "I drive down and, I'll spend a few months here, get away from the cold in New Jersey." He was retired, kind of semi-retired. He says, "Where are you folks from?" So my dad said, "We're from Louisiana." He said, "Oh, really? Where in Louisiana?" He says, "You wouldn't know it. It's a small town, Crowley." He says, "Oh, no." He says, "I know Crowley." "You do?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "When I drive down, I take Highway 90 through Louisiana, and it gets me to Texas." And what he says, in fact, he says, I remember Crowley." He says, "Because one time when I was coming down here, I wasn't feeling well, and I felt like I was coming down with a cold. So I got off the highway. Right there on your main street, there was a doctor's office, and I can't remember his name. He was a young doctor, and I said, 'Was it Dr. Bill Falk?' And he says, 'Yeah.' He says, 'That's him.' I said, 'He's outside.'"
That's crazy. That is crazy.
I went and I got him, and he came in, and they recognized each other. Well, Bill had treated him and didn't charge him anything. I guess he checked him, gave him a shot or whatever. And this was probably in the 50s, late 50s, and sent him on his way. Bill was a smoker, and he had a Zippo lighter with a sterling silver case that was hand-tooled leaf work on it. Okay, like a Western belt. Okay?
Yeah.
This guy had sent it to him as a thank you for treating him from this shop.
That's crazy. And he's standing there, and
he pulled it out. He
that
said,
is
insane.
He says, "You sent me
this."
That's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I can't believe all these years I've never heard that story. Yeah, because of conversation.
Yeah. Most people would go in and say, "Hey, I'm looking for those cufflinks."
Yeah.
Do it. But curiosity, man.
That's awesome, man.
Curiosity.
Tell me your name.
Fred Reggie.
Yeah, no, it works. It works
every time.
So thank you so much for coming, man. You've been on our other podcast, and you agreed to come back on. And I really am excited because you're launching the book you were built to write.
And the book that you encouraged me to write, I might add.
Well, if you see it, say it, right?
That's
right.
So
I've seen it in you for years. I do want to talk about the book and what it's doing for people. Even before it's come out, I can tell you what it's doing for my clients. But why'd you write? Tell me. And what inspired you?
Well, I guess a lot of people think they have a book in them, or they'd like to have a book in them. And certainly you encouraged me based upon our years together and visiting with one another. You say, man, you got a book in you. You got a book in you. And I settled on this book through the work that I'm doing as an executive coach. I deal with a lot of people in leadership positions. And one of the issues that they struggle with, by their own admission, is communication.
100%.
And not just their own personal communication and interaction, but that of people within the company across different departments. And in dealing with these clients, the one thing that kept popping up was when I'd ask them, well, what do you struggle with? I said, well, I don't really know how to properly engage in conversation to get the information that I need. They said, a lot of times we'll have a corporate event where we'll have the CEO or the COO will come in, we'll have presentations, and then afterwards we have a social gathering, maybe it's a dinner together, and I'm seated next to the CEO of the company. And I don't know how to start small talk with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was that small talk thing that just kept, tumbling in my head. And finally, when I would get into the area of talking about communication, something came to mind. And I'll share the story with you in a minute. I told them, I said, if you want to start a conversation with anyone, anywhere, anytime, write these 2 words down. If you don't learn anything else from our session, write these 2 words down. Tell me.
Yeah.
If you want to start a conversation with anyone, start with tell me. It's not a question. It's a directive.
Correct.
You are commanding someone to tell you something. Tell me your name. Tell me about your work. Tell me about your family. And Jeff, it kind of goes back to the old Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You get people to talk about themselves. That's their favorite subject.
Sure.
And by inviting them in, by saying, tell me, you set the stage for them. And then in the process, you become an active listener.
Yeah, and that's one of the keys.
One of the keys to any good
listening.
Absolutely, is to be an active and attentive listener so you can respond. And when you say, tell me, if I say, Jeff, tell me about your work, okay, I've got the radar up. I want to hear everything. I'm obligated to hear that answer and to investigate it deeper as we engage in our conversation. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short. When if I say, what do you do, Jeff?
Yeah.
Well, I might have some preconceived titles or labels that I would attach to you and expecting one of those to pop up. But if I say, tell me about your work, that's going to be a much more detailed conversation where you're going to share the mechanics of what you do. And that's what I want to hear. I want to get to know you and understand what makes you tick.
It almost forces you to drill down and get them to continue talking about themselves. And like you said, because you're now listening actively, you're more engaged and you're not, sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next to respond to them.
Right.
You're listening. So the entire conversation is more fruitful.
Yeah. And look, if you still don't want to step into that space and say anything, that's interesting, Jeff. Tell me more about that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, and then you can listen for the next thing.
Yeah.
So how'd you come up with Tell Me?
Interesting story. More years ago than I would like to recall, like 40. Okay. Dang. I'm sitting at home. I'm watching the CBS Evening News, and I remember it in detail. I'm watching the CBS Evening News, and they had a film crew that was covering a Broadway show that had just opened. No orchestra, no set, no costumes or anything. There were 12 or 15 chairs lined across the stage and 12 or 15 seasoned, legendary actors seated in those chairs. They were passing the microphone around, talking about their career. How did they get into it? What inspired them to become broadcasters or actors or performers? And each one had their own unique story. After the show, the film crew goes to the backstage door. hoping to capture some of these actors coming out maybe for a quick interview. And just to the left of the camera view, and I see this like it was yesterday, were 3 older women, and they were waiting to catch a glimpse of whoever their favorite actor was. Out of the backstage door comes James Earl Jones. Now, we remember James Earl Jones. He had such a commanding presence in everything that he did. The voice, the CNN voice and the Darth Vader voice was one, but he was a phenomenal actor, and he just commanded presence wherever he was. Well, one of these women broke away. She rushes up to him and she says, "Oh, Mr. Jones, you are my favorite actor. I was hoping that I'd get to see you. I've seen you on Broadway. I've seen you in the movies and that wonderful booming voice you have." And she's just gushing and showering him with all this praise. James Earl Jones just turned to her, and you can visualize him. And he just had the kindest look on his face and extended his hand. He says, "Tell me your name." And Jeff, in that moment, something hit me. He didn't say, "Who are you?" Or "What's your name?" "Tell me your name." That showed me a higher level of interest in who this woman was. She wasn't just a fan. It was somebody that captured his attention. And it was like what he didn't say was, "Wow, you're a lot more important than I am right now. Tell me your name."
Yeah, that's so powerful.
It really was. And ever since then, I never did say, "What's your name?" or "Who are you?" when I met somebody. I would always say, "Tell me your name." It wasn't a monumental part of every conversation I had. But it came to light in my work with my clients. Well, wait a minute. Tell me your name. You can apply "tell me" to so many different situations.
Oh, no doubt about it.
One of the clients that I was working with, we went through this whole "tell me" philosophy. And the next week when we had our weekly session, he said, "Fred, before I begin, I want to share a story with you." He said, "I have a 14-year-old daughter. And usually when I see her, I say, 'How was school today?'" And she says, "It was fine. It sucked." She goes into her room, and I don't see her. So whoever your listeners who have teenage children can certainly probably appreciate that. He said, "I decided to try the tell me technique. When I saw her, I said, 'Janie, tell me about your day at school.'" He says, "Fred, she stopped. She turned around. She came and sat on the sofa next to me, and we had a 15-minute conversation." We never have a 15-minute conversation. It's a tool you can use immediately. I mean, there's a lot more depth to it and to the psychology behind it and the chemistry that happens when we have good conversations, but it works.
Where I could personally tell you, because you and I have worked together for years and we've met and compared notes for years on coaching. But when you told me about that at first, this was several years ago, I began using it. And I'm like you. I always start with "tell me your name," and it makes a big difference. A quick story from me. I lead a small group, and I have a few entrepreneurs that are in this group, and I shared with them because your book's about to come out, and I wanted to promote your book with my team.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah, we were having a meeting. We went off outside of Lafayette at one of our cohorts businesses. And we're meeting, and I don't really recall what happened, but I said, "Hey guys, why don't you consider, after I told them about you, why don't you consider starting a conversation with tell me how it went, tell me what you do, tell me your name." And it was an epiphany. It was a light bulb for them. And then I meet monthly with them. The next month they come back, tell me. And all these stories about how it's affecting at work, how they communicate with their husbands and wives. I'm telling you, it's a really remarkable, game-changing tool. But I would use it as a tool, but different scenarios.
And look, Jeff, it's simple.
That's the beauty of it.
We've all read books like The 7 Habits and Who Moved My Cheese and Fish and all of these business. And those are great books and they're inspirational and influential. There's usually a lengthy process of learning.
Yeah.
You've read the 7 Habits. Can you name them?
Well, I can, but I'd have to think about it.
But for most people, can't. Well, I'll have to look. You remember sharpen
7.
the saw.
This is
and
2 words.
Begin with,
yeah.
But this is 2 words. And it's something before, after reading the first 3 chapters of my book, you'll be able to implement it. And I want you to read the whole book because there's a lot of good stuff in it. But if you never read anything beyond the first three chapters or so, you've got it. And you put it into immediate practice.
Let's say for managers, let's say something goes wrong and one of your subordinates comes to you with a problem. If you just said, well, tell me what you think went wrong, or tell me how you think we can fix this.
Right.
They're not defensive now.
Right.
Right. Because I'm asking you to tell me what you think.
Sure.
And then they start the process.
Right.
So
it's an accountability conversation.
Yeah.
And it bridges so many gaps. You can do emails, you can do text messages, but you just doesn't have the impact that a face-to-face conversation has, where you can, we talk about body language.
Yeah.
Can you get a voice inflection? I want to hear people. I want to look in their eyes. I want to see their body language. I want to see how they're positioned. When are they comfortable? When are they uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Not that it's a test, but it gives you a better read on the conversation and the content of the conversation.
Yeah. So one thing I know is that in leadership, communication is one of the pillars, if not the most important. But I want to know why you feel like our ability to communicate effectively has changed so much. And one of my thoughts is the dang cell phone.
Believe me, I address that in one of my chapters where I talk about how we've become cocooned in our communication.
So true.
And it started with Henry Ford.
Here we go.
Started with Henry Ford. Before the Model T came out, people would sit out on their stoops and their porches and they'd talk to people passing by or the people next door, and they had conversations and they interacted with real people face to face and encountered. Then the automobile comes along and it enabled people to encapsulate themselves and to drive past people at 20 miles, 25 miles an hour, not even bother waving. It was just a shell that moved. Then radio steps in, pulls people off the front porch and into the living room to listen to serials and whatnot. Okay, everybody's sitting around the radio. Then television comes in and everyone's sitting there facing the television, not facing one another, and being entertained. Then televisions in each room comes into being, where you can go watch your show in your room and we're going to watch. So the family unit becomes fragmented and just pulled away. Okay. Then we start talking about computers and smartphones and whatnot. I'm preaching to the choir, for not just to you, but anyone who's watching and listening to this. They can relate to it. We go out to eat and you see people on there. So I was in Houston this past week with my wife, and we went through the Galleria. And in fact, I just wrote a blog about this because it struck me. We're going through the Galleria and we're passing Louis Vuitton and Zegna and Fendi and Ferragamo and all these, and Neiman Marcus, all of these top brand names. And I'm looking into the stores. 90% of the people working in the store had their heads down, looking at their phones. And I waited until someone walked into one of the stores to see how quickly they would respond. The potential customer, had to practically be right in front of them before they put the phone down.
Yeah.
That's where we are. People are more comfortable in isolation with their heads down, not maintaining eye contact. And another thing that bugged me about it, everybody wears black.
Yeah.
No, everyone, whether it was at Louis Vuitton, whether it was at Fendi or any of those stores, they could go work in any of those other stores and just blend in. Yeah. And I guess it's a cultural thing in retail now or whatever,
maybe.
But it was just so monochromatic.
Yeah.
And so anyway, getting back to your point, the smartphone and technology has just really crippled so many people and young people today. And look, I'm the old guy with gray hair, and I'm not lecturing, but there is so much opportunity that is missed by not being able to engage in a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time. Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, and he talks about how the phone has replaced the playground for kids.
Absolutely. I see it every day. And my kids, when they were growing up, it's like, man.
And this is not about kids, but this is what is being shaped that's coming into the workforce.
That's exactly right.
And you have to have those conversations, and you have to emphasize the important. You have to reward people for having a good conversation.
Yeah.
Let them know
that's
the
crazy
value.
when you think about it, but it is. It's what we're having to do today because they're just not prepared.
No.
I will
Jeff, have you've been to a funeral or two
sure.
or three or
Last
four?
week,
I've been to a lot of funerals.
Yeah.
I've delivered 5 eulogies myself. And my eulogy and any eulogy that I've ever heard, and I challenge you to contradict me on this, no one ever referred to a great text message that they got from the deceased.
That's great.
They talk about engagement.
Yeah.
They talk about conversations they had, the memories of conversations and times that they spent in the presence of the deceased.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to remember you for your text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? What kind of legacy are you leaving?
And it really does start with relationships, and relationships are based on communication.
Yeah.
It's just so wildly important.
Yeah. And as I say in the book, reading this book is not going to make you a better conversationalist. You have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You have to take that and just step into that uncomfortable space. For a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of people are very shy and apprehensive about engaging in conversation. But to your point about leadership, it's so critically important that a leader in a company engages in conversation and has their employees, their subordinates, feel comfortable in that space as well.
Yeah, sure.
And you make them feel comfortable by making them feel valued.
Yeah.
By being the active listener. I hear what you're saying.
And to touch on that, I want to go back to, look, not everybody is blessed like we are and as fortunate as we are, but talking to a stranger, it's one of the most important things that I think can come out of this book. Sure, leadership, business, but when you meet somebody and you start with, tell me your name, they're seen.
Absolutely.
They're important when they probably feel like they're invisible.
Yep.
And I'm very intentional to talk to strangers and to people. When I feel like somebody potentially feels invisible,
yeah,
I always start, tell me. And let me tell you what, it brightens up their day. It might be the only interaction they get
right
that day. And so what you've done is extremely important.
Can I riff on that just for a minute?
Please.
To that point,
Yeah.
to that point about strangers. A couple has a child. Child gets to be about 18 months old. Mama, Dada, come on, give me a word. Give me a word. You know, we want to hear the first
And they're
words.
so happy. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
and so as they celebrated like the 4th of July, every new word, then they start putting a couple of words together and then a phrase together, and then they're able to respond if you ask them a question. So all of this becomes celebratory in the household until the child starts asking too many questions and talking too much. So will you just be quiet and let us talk? Your father and I are trying to talk, or your mother and I are trying to talk. Okay. And so you start putting a lid on that excitement. Then, and I really believe this has a powerful impact, Jeff. Then they get to 4 or 5 years old, never talk to strangers.
Yeah.
Stranger danger.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, while the intention is well-meaning, but all of a sudden, hey, we don't know this person, so don't talk to him.
That's right.
Don't talk to him. And I really believe that stays fixated in the back of our minds as we go into school, and we can't talk in class, and you can't talk in line, and you can't talk in church, and you can't talk here, and you have all these talk boundaries.
Yep.
We just, well, okay. So when you're sitting on an airplane, you sit on an airplane next to someone for 2.5 hours and you don't even say hello.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's sad to me.
It is sad.
I can't do it.
It is sad. And you never know what's going to come out of those conversations.
That's right. That's right.
You're
going to have things in common. You're going to, at the end, say, what a small world. But if you never engage, you never find out.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
huge.
And I'm all about discovery. I love having those conversations to learn about people. And what do they call it? The 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
At some point, and I shared a story with you earlier about that.
Yep.
Where a podcaster that I know very well was in Minneapolis visiting a client. He's from St. Louis, and he was visiting one of his industrial clients in Minneapolis. And he and I that day had a conversation about conversation and initiating conversation. That night, he sent me a text message, and he says, "Do you know West Brothers Store?" And I said, "Yeah, we had one in my hometown of Crowley." He says, "I'm sitting with the granddaughter of the owner." And as it turned out, long story short, she lived at the same time as I did when we were kids. I was 9 years old. She was maybe 4 or 5. We lived 4 blocks from one another in Crowley. So you never know until you investigate, until you open up the door to conversation.
Yep, no doubt about it.
I know.
So how do you think... tell me the book. I want the subtitle.
The subtitle is How to Initiate and Nurture Meaningful Conversations with Anyone, Anywhere, Anytime.
That's huge. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So how do you think the book and the work you do with leaders is helping their lead their people, helping them?
It helps to open communication. It makes them aware of there's a lot of information they need, and they have to extricate it from people. And sometimes it's like pulling teeth. It makes it a lot easier. It creates an easier conversation flow. It elevates the person that is being asked to engage in this conversation, or who is instructed to tell me about something. It elevates their sense of importance in the company.
No.
Because I value your opinion. Tell me what you think about this project. Tell me how you think we can do a better job next time.
Huge.
Okay? Huge. And when we used to call it open door policy. You remember this? There's an open door policy. You can always pop. Well, I think we need to have an open communication policy in business.
Yep.
And not just with senior leadership, but across the silos that we see in business, the accounting department, the sales department, the service department. They have to be able to interact.
Yep.
We've got a generational divide that we've never seen in this country in the workplace before. We have 5 generations working under the same roof.
Yeah.
And as a boomer, I grew up in a completely different era and have a completely different perspective on how things should be done. And that 24-year-old Gen Z that just came in has their own perspective of how things, and look, they're smart. They're a lot smarter than I am. They certainly have the technological tools. But instead of saying, well, when I was your age and I came, or to say, hey, yeah, you think you're the OG, but you're not, and we know a lot more than you do. Instead, have a conversation. Tell me about how it was in this business when you first entered the workforce.
Yeah, that's great.
Tell me what you learned in your 30 years with the company that I'm looking forward to have.
Yeah.
And by the same token, I should be asking, tell me what is the most important aspect of your work focus. Tell me how you think about the work environment, the dynamic. So let the tell me become a bridge for communication to where you can both cross it and learn from one another. I
love it.
It's like learning the service culture of business. You want to know, what's the history here?
Yeah.
How did this company get started?
Yep. I love it. And it's so important, both not only within the silos, but in the echelons of leadership and from owner to leader to emerging leader to team member. At every level, this needs to be part of an effort to make communication simpler. And again, I go back to the beauty of Tell Me is the simplicity.
It's very simple.
I know. And so it just starts with that. So you have these leaders. What I love about the message is not only leadership or business. We can screw up relationships by not communicating well. My wife's grandmother, we go in and what is one thing you would tell us? She says, learn how to communicate.
Yeah.
Always communicate. And she was right. And next week is our 24-year-old anniversary. So we got together about 25 years ago, and she started with that. And I cannot tell you how many times we bring up her grandmother, who's been gone for years,
Yeah.
When it comes to growing people, I assume that you're trying to make sure that they get their relationships right. And tell me, like that story you said about the guy and his 14-year-old daughter. Yeah. But it can go with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever.
Socially, family, professionally, you can apply it in any situation. Yeah. And look, I will tell you that it's more challenging in a family just because of the whole family dynamic. It's a business that's always open.
That's right. And boundaries are being crossed and everything else.
And I'll be the first to admit, that I fall short in that area in a lot of instances.
What can we do to work on that?
Just use Tell Me.
I agree.
I really have conversation.
That's right. And again, it shows that you want to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
And that's where the breakdown comes a lot of times, because it's like you put your hand up and say, I don't need to hear it. Right.
Right.
But tell them they're important. Tell them they matter and their perspective is important.
Sure.
And it goes such a long way.
And don't be afraid to hear the negative stuff.
Well, yeah.
Don't be afraid to hear what you're doing wrong.
Yeah. Yep.
Our egos get in the way. You're not just in family life, but in business as well.
100%. Yeah. So tell me about the book launch. When can we expect it, and how can we get it, either pre-launch or whatever?
Okay, certainly within the next 3 weeks, we should be able to launch.
So I'm waiting for
I'm waiting for the final edits to come from the designer, the formatting. So probably in about 3 weeks. In the meantime, if someone would like to visit fredreggie.com/book, you can register and get signed up to be notified when the book is going to be released at a substantial discount that day. We'll have a launch day, and we'll have a discount for the ebook and for the hardcover.
Okay. And I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
To make sure everybody get it. And then, we'll be promoting this episode with some reels and stuff like that.
And let me say, when you go and you sign up for that, there's also a button where it says reasons to buy and also raving reviews.
Yeah.
And I have a list of people who have read preview copies of it and have contributed some comments. And that'll give you a little insight into what the book's about and how beneficial it'll be.
Yeah.
And again, it's something the whole family can enjoy.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll share a quick story with you. One of the guys that and it's written up in the praise section. I had given it to him to read the preview copy, and he wrote me back and said he was going to get a copy for his wife and for each of their 4 children because they think it serves as a family study guide. Okay, he had a sister who committed suicide, and he feels like this is something that'll help his children have a better sense of self-worth, improve their self-image, and hopefully avoid something like that in the future in a family.
You've told me you're writing this book. If you can help one person,
that's it.
And already, I'm telling you, it makes such a difference. My small group, when they came back the next month and they had practiced it, and I asked them, "How did you practice it? Tell me some stories."
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, over and over and over again. Again, the beauty's in the simplicity. I just hope that people practice it. So here's what I want to ask you too, because I've written a book, and I always say it's easy to start a book. It's really hard to finish.
Yeah.
And it was very cathartic for me. So tell me what this has meant for your life, and what you hope to bring to people, to the world?
Well, what it's meant for me, it's given me a realization that I have something of value to contribute. I'm not looking to be a bestseller. I'm not looking to make a fortune on this book. That's not the objective. When I first started writing, I'm thinking, hey, this would be cool if it becomes a bestseller and I can sell 1 million copies. No, the more I discussed it with people and people shared stories with me, the more I realized that if this book can change the life of just one person, it'll be worth all of the effort and all of the expense that I've incurred over the last 2 years to get it done. And I know it'll change more lives because I think it'll have a ripple effect. And if you're a better communicator and you have a better relationship with a family member or a friend or someone at work, your cohorts, your colleagues, it's served its purpose. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. There's no magic to it. I'm not, you're not going to become the millionaire next door, but you'll handle yourself better than the millionaire next door.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love that, man. So is there anything else you want to share before we go?
No, this one. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about it. And I do hope that people will take advantage of it and buy the book and read it seriously and intentionally and put it into practice immediately. You can't go wrong. If you say, tell me about your work, tell me about your vacation plans, tell me about your family, what harm is that?
That's right.
That is as benign a question from a standpoint of, am I going to be judged for asking this question? Not at all. Am I going to, a lot of people are introverts and they don't like to approach conversation because they don't know what to say. Well, guess what? You don't have to say anything other than tell me.
Yeah, 2 words. You can get it out.
2 words. You get it out and sit back and let the other person talk 80% of the time. And as Dale Carnegie said, they will think you are the most brilliant conversationalist on the planet.
That's right. That's right. It is so funny.
Because you listened.